Spent 15 years raising kids that weren't mine, then she just walked away. When I first met Mike, I never imagined my life would turn out the way it did. He was charming, full of laughter, and in many ways, everything I had ever wanted in a partner. But Mike wasn't just any man. He came with baggage, and that baggage came in the form of his 2 children, Lily and Ben. I was in my early 30s when we met. I had always dreamed of a family, my own little world filled with love and laughter. But I had also envisioned it happening in a more conventional way: marriage, a house, and then kids. So, when Mike shared that he had a 10-year-old daughter and an 8-year-old son from a previous relationship, I thought to myself, well, that's not ideal, but I can make it work. We were in the honeymoon phase of our relationship when I first met them. The kids seemed to like me, or at least, they tolerated me. They were polite, shy at first, and I thought I was doing well. After all, I was just trying to be myself and be a good influence in their lives, even though I knew I wasn't their mother. I wasn't sure what role I was supposed to play, but I decided to just be there for them, no matter what. Mike and I moved in together after about a year. I don't think I fully understood what that decision would mean. Yes, I was excited about building a life with him, but I hadn't taken into account how challenging it would be to step into the shoes of a stepmother. Being a partner is one thing, being a mother to children that aren't biologically yours is something else entirely. I remember the first time I helped Lily with her math homework. She was struggling with long division, and I had to try and explain it to her in a way she could understand. I'll admit, I was nervous. What if I did something wrong? What if she didn't like me? But when I finally saw her face light up after I showed her how to work through a problem, I felt a sense of pride, like I had truly connected with her in a way I hadn't expected. It wasn't just the little moments like that that made me feel invested in their lives. It was the day-to-day. I woke up every morning to make breakfast, pack lunches, and make sure they got off to school on time. I found myself taking them to their school events, watching soccer games, and eventually helping them navigate their teenage years with all the ups and downs that come with that. It wasn't always easy, but I genuinely loved them. Mike had his moments, of course, but I could see he was a good father, even though he wasn't always around as much as I wished he would be. He worked long hours, and when he was home, he was often exhausted. I was the one who took care of most of the daily responsibilities, and I didn't mind at first. I loved those kids. They weren't mine by blood, but they had become mine in every other way that mattered. I poured my heart into them, giving them the love and structure they needed. And for a while, it felt like everything was working. But as the years passed, the reality of what I had signed up for began to settle in. It wasn't always easy being the one who had to pick up the slack when Mike was busy or tired. I was juggling my own work, my own dreams, and then all the responsibilities of raising children who weren't mine. I never complained, at least not out loud, but sometimes I would lie awake at night, wondering if this was what my life was really supposed to be. I had given up a lot: my own career aspirations, my social life, and even small joys like sleeping in or taking spontaneous trips. I loved those kids, but there was a part of me that wondered if I had lost something in the process of giving them everything I had. I was so focused on being the perfect stepmother that I forgot about being me. The days bled into years, and I started to notice changes. Lily and Ben were growing up. They didn't need me as much as they used to. They had their own friends, their own interests. I didn't mind that, but it left a hole in my heart that I wasn't prepared for. Mike, on the other hand, seemed distant. He was still working long hours, and even when he was home, it felt like there was a wall between us. At first, I thought it was just stress, but after a while, I started to wonder if something was missing. I began to feel like I was just going through the motions, raising kids who weren't mine, doing everything for a family that wasn't truly mine either. Still, I kept going. I didn't know what else to do. Every time I thought about stepping back, about letting go, I would see Lily and Ben's faces that I had helped raise, who had come to rely on me. I couldn't walk away from them, not when they needed me. So I kept going. Every day, every year. For 15 years, I gave everything I had. But what I didn't know, what no one told me, was that one day it wouldn't be enough. The first few years were filled with the bliss of newness, new routines, new experiences, new responsibilities. But as the years stretched into a decade, I began to feel the weight of everything pressing down on me. I started to notice the cracks, the quiet moments where I felt isolated despite being surrounded by people. Raising kids who weren't mine, who had their own mother they saw on holidays or weekends, was never simple. I loved Lily and Ben as if they were my own, but I wasn't always sure they saw me the same way. They had memories of their mother, of the life before I came into the picture. I was just the woman who made breakfast and helped with homework. And while I didn't expect them to love me the way they loved her, it was hard not to feel like an outsider in a house that was supposed to be mine, too. It didn't help that Mike wasn't always emotionally present. As much as I loved him, his detachment over the years became more obvious. At first, I thought it was just work stress, long hours, and the pressure of trying to provide. But after a while, I realized it was more than that. He wasn't the partner I had imagined him to be. He was a great father in his own way, but he was often too tired or overwhelmed to truly see what I was going through. I was raising his kids, our kids now, but I felt like I was doing it alone. At night, when the kids were in bed, I would sit on the couch next to him, but it was like we were worlds apart. We hardly talked anymore. What started as a deep connection slowly dwindled to small talk about bills and the kids' school events. His focus was always on the next thing, the next deadline, the next project, the next task, and mine was always on the here and now. I spent so much of my energy keeping things together, making sure everyone was happy, that I forgot what it meant to be happy myself. I tried to bring it up once. We were sitting at the kitchen table, a pile of bills between us. The kids were off doing their own thing. I looked at Mike, exhausted, and said, "I think we need to talk. I feel like we're not us anymore. We're just coexisting, taking care of things. But we're not really talking." He set down the pen he was using to sign a check and looked at me, but there was no spark of understanding in his eyes. "I'm just tired, honey. I'm doing this for us, for the family," he said, his tone defensive. "You know how hard I work." I nodded, but something inside of me broke. It was the same response I'd heard over and over again. "I'm doing this for you." But what was I doing for me? Where had I gone in all this? I had spent the last decade giving everything I had to this family, his family, and in return, I felt more invisible than ever. I wasn't just his partner anymore. I was the one who took care of the kids, kept the house in order, and made sure everything functioned. I wasn't a person anymore. I was a role. The kids were growing up, and with that came a new set of challenges. Lily, now a teenager, began to pull away. She wasn't the sweet little girl I had once helped with her math homework. She was distant, moody, and often refused to talk to me. I tried to connect, but she would roll her eyes and shut me out. It hurt. I'd spent years caring for her, being there for her when she needed someone, and now she barely acknowledged my presence. I knew it wasn't personal. It was just a stage she was going through. But it felt like a rejection I couldn't shake. Ben, on the other hand, had always been the more sensitive one. But as he entered his teenage years, he began to retreat into himself too. I still helped him with schoolwork, but our conversations were short, and I could feel him pulling away. I understood the need for independence, but it stung to realize that after all these years, I wasn't the person he came to when he needed comfort or guidance. Mike, of course, didn't seem to notice. His work continued to consume him, and when he did come home, he would often retreat into his own world, either in front of the TV or buried in his phone. The more I tried to talk to him, the more I felt like I was talking to a wall. The isolation I had begun to feel in our relationship was spilling over into every part of my life. I had friends, but I couldn't remember the last time I'd made time to see them. My identity had become so intertwined with being a stepmother that I didn't know who I was outside of that role. I had given up my career to support Mike's ambition, and in doing so, I had lost a piece of myself. I remember one day, standing in front of the mirror, looking at the woman staring back at me. I hardly recognized her. My hair was pulled back into a messy bun, and my clothes were practical, not fashionable. I had bags under my eyes from lack of sleep, and my skin had lost its glow. I used to be someone who cared about how I looked, who enjoyed taking care of myself. But now, it felt like I was too busy being everything to everyone else to take care of me. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to scream at Mike for not seeing how much I was doing, for not acknowledging how tired I was, how stretched thin I had become. But instead, I just kept going. I pushed my feelings down, one after the other, and kept going. There was always something that needed to be done. An errand, a chore, a kid's issue to solve. I didn't realize it at the time, but all this effort, all this sacrifice, was quietly eroding me from the inside. I had become the person who was always there for others, always giving, but never asking for anything in return. I didn't know how much longer I could keep it up. And yet I kept going. Because that's what you do when you've committed yourself to something. When you've spent years building a life with someone and their children. You don't stop. You don't walk away. Or at least, that's what I thought. But in the back of my mind, there was always that nagging question. What if I didn't have to? What if I could just stop and take care of myself for once? I didn't have an answer to that, but I could feel something inside me shifting. Something was breaking. Something was about to give. It came without warning, like a thunderstorm that breaks the calm sky. One morning, I woke up to an empty house. Mike had been gone when I woke up, which wasn't unusual. He had a lot of late-night work commitments, and I often didn't know when he would be home. But this time was different. There were no notes, no texts, no calls. I had grown used to his absences, but this felt like something had shifted. Something was wrong. I tried not to overthink it. Maybe he was busy. Maybe he had stayed late at the office, or had a meeting that went longer than expected. But as the hours stretched into midday, and then into the afternoon, the doubt crept in. I tried calling him. No answer. I texted, asking where he was and if everything was okay. No response. By dinner time, I knew something was off. Lily and Ben came home from school, and they could see I was anxious. They asked about Mike, but I didn't have any answers. The kids were quiet, Ben more so than usual. Lily was distracted, as teenagers are, but I noticed the way her eyes kept flicking to me, as if she could feel the tension in the air. It wasn't until late in the evening that I finally heard from him. It wasn't a phone call, though. It was a text, and the words were simple but heavy. I need space. I'm leaving for a while. I stared at the screen, my heart pounding in my chest. The words didn't make sense. I reread them, trying to grasp their meaning. I need space. It was as if he had forgotten that we had already been living in separate worlds for years. The distance between us wasn't new. What was new was the decision to leave, to take the separation even further. I texted him back, my fingers trembling as I typed. What do you mean? Where are you going? We need to talk. But he didn't reply. Not that night. Not the next day. Not at all. I sat there, staring at my phone, feeling the weight of everything that had built up over the years come crashing down. I had spent so much of my time and energy on him, on the kids. I had given up pieces of myself, pieces I wasn't sure I could ever get back, and now he was just gone. I didn't know how to tell the kids. They were confused, too, especially Lily. Ben was quiet, withdrawing into himself like he always did when things were off. But Lily was the one who looked at me with that hurt, questioning expression. She was old enough to understand what was happening. She had seen the cracks in our family long before I had, and now she saw the final blow. I'm sure it's just temporary, I said, though I didn't believe it. I told her that her dad just needed time to think, but I knew that wasn't true. He didn't just need time. He needed a way out of everything. His responsibilities, his family, the life we had built together. The days passed, and there was still no word from him. The house was filled with a quiet, unnerving emptiness. Lily and Ben seemed to retreat even further, both of them struggling to process the absence of their father, their lives turned upside down. I tried to keep everything together, to act like everything was fine, but the weight of the silence crushed me. I was angry, but more than that, I was devastated. He had walked away without a word, without even the decency to explain. 15 years of my life, 15 years of sacrifice, love, and commitment, gone just like that. I was left holding the pieces. I didn't know what to do with them. I thought about our life together, the years I had spent building a family with Mike and his children. I had poured everything into that life, into them. And now, it felt like it had all been for nothing. It wasn't just about the loss of him. It was about the loss of everything I had believed in. The kids were struggling, yes, but I was struggling too. I had spent so long being a mother to children who weren't mine, a partner to a man who had never truly been there, that I had forgotten who I was outside of that. Now, with Mike gone, I was faced with the terrifying reality that I was starting over alone. I didn't know where Mike was. I didn't know if he'd ever come back. And I didn't know what the future held for me or for the kids. All I knew was that everything had changed in an instant, and I wasn't sure if I was strong enough to pick up the pieces. The first few days after Mike left were a blur. I kept waiting for him to come back, for him to walk through the door and tell me it had all been a mistake. Maybe he was just overwhelmed, or maybe he thought he needed a break to clear his head. But the days stretched on without a word from him, and the silence began to feel deafening. Lily and Ben seemed to react to the situation in their own ways. Ben, the younger of the two, was quiet and withdrawn, as he always was when something upset him. I found him curled up on the couch more often than not, staring at the TV but not really watching. He wouldn't talk about Mike, and I didn't press him. Sometimes, I would catch him looking at his phone, probably waiting for a message that would never come. Lily, on the other hand, was more outspoken about her feelings. She was angry, hurt, and confused, all at once. She asked me, over and over again, why would he just leave like that? Doesn't he care about us? Doesn't he care about me? It was hard to explain that I didn't know. I didn't have answers. I didn't understand it myself. I'm sure he'll come back, I would tell her, though I wasn't sure of anything anymore. Your dad just needs some time. We'll figure this out. But even as I said those words, I felt the lie on the tip of my tongue. I didn't know if he would come back. I didn't know if he wanted to. The house felt emptier without him. It wasn't just his physical presence that was missing. It was the part of me that had always been waiting for him to come home, for him to acknowledge the effort I had put into our life together. Now, I had no idea where I stood. My whole identity had been wrapped up in being his partner, in being there for his kids. And now that role was suddenly gone. I started going through the motions of daily life, trying to keep some semblance of normalcy for the kids. I made them breakfast, drove them to school, helped them with their homework. But every step felt hollow, as though I were walking through a life that wasn't mine anymore. The routine was the only thing I could cling to, but even that felt like it was slipping through my fingers. I tried reaching out to Mike. I texted him several times, telling him that we needed to talk, that the kids needed to hear from him. But there was no reply, not even an acknowledgement of my messages. The silence was suffocating. I began to feel like I had been abandoned, not just by Mike, but by everything I had believed in. I had spent so many years giving my all to this family, and now I was left to pick up the pieces alone. I couldn't even begin to process the anger I felt toward him. It was so easy for him to just walk away, to leave me to deal with the fallout. He hadn't even given me a chance to understand what had gone wrong, to fix it. It was as though he had decided I wasn't worth the effort anymore, and that was the part that stung the most. I tried to focus on the kids. They needed me. They were still adjusting to the reality that their father had left without any explanation. I could see it in the way they interacted with each other, the way they tried to hide their hurt behind forced smiles. I had to be strong for them. I had to hold it together, even though my own heart felt shattered. But there were moments, quiet moments, when I would sit in the stillness of the house, the silence pressing down on me. I would allow myself to feel the weight of everything I had lost. 15 years. I had spent 15 years building a life with Mike and his children. 15 years of sacrifice, of giving everything I had. And now it was all gone. I didn't know who I was anymore. I had spent so long being someone else's partner, someone else's mother, that I had lost touch with who I was outside of those roles. I didn't know how to exist without them, without the life I had built. I felt an overwhelming sense of grief, not just for the relationship that had ended, but for myself. I had given up so much of who I was, so much of my own identity, in the name of family. And now, with Mike gone, I was left to pick up the pieces of a life that wasn't mine anymore. I didn't know where to start. I didn't know how to rebuild. I started seeing a therapist. I didn't know what else to do. Talking to someone about the situation helped, even though it didn't provide any easy answers. I wasn't ready to face all the emotions I was feeling: anger, sadness, confusion. But slowly, I began to understand something. I couldn't keep sacrificing myself for people who weren't willing to meet me halfway. I couldn't keep giving without getting anything in return. The process of rebuilding myself was going to be slow. But I realized that I had to do it for me, for the person I had been before I became someone else's everything. As for the kids, I didn't know what the future held. They were still processing everything, and I knew I had to be patient with them, just as I had always been patient with myself. But I wasn't sure how to help them with the hole Mike had left behind. We were all grieving in our own ways, trying to find a new normal in the aftermath of a sudden departure. The hardest part, though, was realizing that the family I had spent years building, the family I had poured my heart and soul into, had crumbled in an instant. And all I could do now was try to pick up the pieces,